The Conjuring: The Devil Made Me Do It is the latest film within the Conjuring universe and is now the third official Conjuring film, making it now a trilogy. In 2013 we had The Conjuring, in 2016 we had The Conjuring 2, and now in 2021 we have The Conjuring: The Devil Made Me Do It from director Michael Chaves, who also did The Curse of La Llorona, and it features Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga. Paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren take on one of the most sensational cases of their careers after a cop stumbles upon a dazed and bloodied young man walking down the road. Accused of murder, the suspect claims demonic possession as his defense, forcing the Warrens into a supernatural inquiry unlike anything they've ever seen before. Now guys, before I give you my review of The Conjuring: The Devil Made Me Do It, I want to see what you guys have to say about this new Conjuring film down in the comment section below. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Or are you somewhere right in the middle? Just comment down below, let me know. Now, I have this review up a little later than I initially intended. I was going to have this review up when the embargo actually lifted. That was around about 2 hours ago now by the time I'm actually recording this. Because I really needed to sit and think about this movie and how I really felt, because I felt really conflicted. As someone who really enjoyed the first Conjuring movie while not loving it, I did absolutely love The Conjuring 2. I'm also someone who actually didn't think The Curse of La Llorona deserved a lot of the hate that it got. I found that movie to be quite enjoyable and quite tense. So I was really excited to go see The Conjuring: The Devil Made Me Do It, knowing that Michael Chaves, the director behind The Curse of La Llorona, was actually behind the camera this time. And I thought after all the Conjuring movies, if anyone was going to actually bring the third Conjuring movie to life, it was either going to be David F. Sandberg, who did Annabelle Creation, or Michael Chaves, who did The Curse of La Llorona. And when I found out that he was doing the third Conjuring movie, I was very excited. But unfortunately, things started to go downhill when that trailer dropped. That trailer, while I thought it was fascinating to me, and while I thought it was interesting, it didn't really catch my attention, and more or less gave me a sense of intrigue rather than excitement. So when I went the other night to go see this movie at the early press screening, I took a friend of mine, and throughout the entire movie, we were just bored, and we, after the movie, just turned to each other and just said, wow, that was really bad. Neither of us really enjoyed this movie. I really didn't enjoy this movie. I thought that this movie was a major misfire that suffers from a major identity crisis. I will say though that even though I didn't like this movie, there are definitely elements of it that are really great. First of all, Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga, once again as Ed and Lorraine Warren, give their all and do such a fantastic job, just like in the previous Conjuring movies, when it comes to their roles and bringing these real-life people to the big screen. They do such an amazing job in these roles, and it's that connection that they have together, their chemistry and camaraderie on screen as husband and wife, as Ed and, Lorraine, that works so well in regards to their bond, and one of the reasons why you care about this narrative still, even though there's not much else that is interesting going on in the background. They really are the heart and soul of these movies, and they work so well together, they play off of each other so well, and are still heartfelt and endearing, although I do think a lot of that comes from the development from The Conjuring 1 and 2, even though they do try to further develop it in this movie. I just didn't find it as interesting or as connective as the first two movies' development for these two characters, but nonetheless, they still do a great job in this movie. And need I mention as well that Michael Chaves, as the director, he does some really interesting stuff behind the scenes here. He does some really great stuff behind the camera, and he has a really good visual eye to filmmaking. There are so many moments within the horror sequences, or just how he frames every single shot, some stylistic choices in regards to more or less the demonic possession sort of events that happen. There are some very awesome stylistic things that he chooses to do in this movie that I thought was absolutely great, really effective at times. Unfortunately, aside from that, there isn't really much I liked about this movie. There's a young boy in this movie who you see in the opening scene that you also see in the trailer on the waterbed. Don't remember the actor's name. Hold on, I actually need to mention his name. His name is Julian Hilliard, who was, also in The Haunting of Hill House. He was also in Color Out of Space with Nicolas Cage. He played the young boy, I think it was Billy. I get the twins mixed up, but I think it was Billy that he played in WandaVision earlier this year. And once again in this movie, he proves himself to be a rising young talent. He is absolutely incredible in this movie and gives easily my favorite performance of the film itself. The opening scene of this movie as well is absolutely enthralling. The opening scene of this movie, and even the first 30 minutes of this movie, I felt were so good. The opening scene, the opening exorcism is so fucking tense, so suspenseful, and just fast-paced. It is so good to see, and I was just like, is this going to be great? Like, I was so excited to see what was going to happen after that opening scene, and what followed on until the first part of the court case and everything, which, by the way, the court case was marketed to be more than it actually is. There's only really like maybe 3 or 4 scenes with it that last about 30 seconds each time it appears. After that, the movie really goes downhill to become something that, while it has some interesting elements, it just suffers from having none of the intrigue. This is a very uneventful, uninteresting movie that doesn't have much going on. This is just Ed and Lorraine Warren going on a breadcrumb trail, trying to do some investigative work, and you kind of question, where the fuck are the police? Yes, the police are in this movie. There are moments in it where I'm like, okay, that's cool, but in the end, it's just Ed and Lorraine doing the entire thing, and I understand from the demonic possession side of things, I do understand that, but at the same time, it doesn't provide anything that's really interesting. It constantly seems to derail itself because the pacing is all over the place. This is not a particularly interesting movie. There is nothing particularly invested because it's just going from place to place to place to place, and then it's trying to set up this lore in what's going on, but with no follow through. There is some interesting elements within this movie that I wanted to see explored more, but unfortunately this movie has an unnecessary case of being overly comedic. A lot of the scares, a lot of the tension, and a lot of the really interesting elements in this movie are unfortunately overshadowed by unnecessary attempts at comedy that are more cringeworthy than effective or funny. There were moments in this movie where one-liners would happen, or these little quippy jokes would happen from Ed, Lorraine, or anyone else, and I kind of just sat there scratching my head or held my head in my palms, because it was just so unnecessary, cringeworthy, and felt so out of place. That's what I mean by this movie suffers from a major identity crisis. It wants to be a family movie. It wants to be a horror movie. It wants to be an investigative movie. It wants to be a police movie. It wants to be a court movie. It wants to be a paranormal movie while also trying to at times be a comedy. And all these tones trying to mix it together could work, but unfortunately within the script, there is nothing else that is really interesting because of the overshadowed, tonal inconsistencies and the fact that it doesn't develop upon the really interesting elements. Everything feels incredibly abrupt for the reason that it has a very distracting case of overly using the fade to black or cut to black stuff within the film to bridge or transition to other scenes because they couldn't find or figure out a neat way within the script to, transition and cut to the next scene without a fade to black or a cut to black. And that was something that happened more times than I cared to admit in the movie. And in some cases in movies, this can work. But in this case, I found it to be very, very distracting and one that really pulled me out of the film. Now, a lot of the questions that a lot of people will probably have in regards to this movie is it scary? You go to a movie like The Conjuring 3, The Devil Made Me Do It, or any of the Conjuring films to be scared, especially because the first one, while I didn't find it too scary, I found it very intense. The second movie, I found both intense, atmospheric, and fucking horrifying, especially due to a lot of lore that they use in the real life terms that they incorporate into the film, its script, and its actual narrative. You go into these movies to be scared. And The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It has some moments where I feel like there could be a scary thing happen. There is some great setup at times in regards to cinematography and sound design to really build up tension and suspense. The atmosphere in this movie at times is absolutely fucking fantastic, which is why it's frustrating for me to say that this movie has no payoff and isn't scary in the slightest after that. While it has great setup, the payoff is just a really loud, obnoxious noise with some really weird editing that at times has an odd choice of being higher in frame rate. What? I don't understand a lot of the choices that were made in this movie, especially the scare sequences, and it is very distracting at times. I found this movie to be very good in the sense of the setup when it came to the scares, but unfortunately fell down when it came to the overall payoff to have that big climax of the scare. This, unfortunately, just overutilizes jump scares. There are so many moments where I was just like, oh, for fuck's sake, and I would be able to see what was coming. It's the simple rule of the sound drains out, there's some slow creeping, the camera pans really slowly, the character looks this way, oh, it's not there, alright, we'll turn back around, boom! And that's all it is. It's the simple case of look somewhere, it's not there, turn back around and it's fucking there, and it is really, really annoying. It's all very predictable. My friend who I brought to the movie with me, she hates horror movies. She fucking hates them. She was so scared in, Hereditary, The Curse of La Llorona as well. She was terrified. In this movie, whenever she would be like, nope, 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 it's because of the suspense and the tension. And then when it actually happened, she was like, oh, that wasn't really scary. Again, I will say there were some interesting elements of this movie that really worked for me. There are some moments in the film where I'm like, those are some really great ideas where I wish they had a better follow through. There are some talented actors in this movie. There are some sequences in this movie where I felt like it could be really effective, that could really bring into a horror element, that could really make this movie and bring in this true life case. Yes, I'm a skeptic, but at the same time, there are some interesting elements in this movie where I'm like, this could be a great movie, but it suffers from too much of an identity crisis, from trying to be a horror movie to an investigative movie, to trying to be a paranormal investigation movie, to trying to also be a sort of comedy, a family comedy sort of thing, and it just doesn't work. There are some elements in this movie as well where I'm like, that purely happens for the sense of inconvenience and conflict. And that's like Ed on the cane or in the wheelchair at the beginning of the movie. Like, that's purely in there for conflict. There is no other purpose for it to have, because by the end of the movie, I honestly forgot he was even using the cane, if he was using it at all. I will say though, that Denethor from fucking Lord of the Rings, the Steward of Gondor, is easily the most interesting character in this movie, who is completely fucking wasted. So that made me sad. In the end, this is a frustrating movie because I see so much potential in this film to be so goddamn good, but there were just so many bad choices in regards to payoff and development that are made within the film that it's just not very interesting, that it's not very effective, that it's just constantly pulling you out of its own movie from tonal inconsistencies, identity crisis, and a lack of scares. The lore and the more or less investigation aspect could be interesting, but when it tries to develop upon certain things, there are so many aspects that are just so distracting that pull you out of it. Therefore, even if it does try to develop upon it, you're not really all that invested. I really didn't like The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. This is such a frustrating movie, especially because Michael Chaves is such a talented director and does such a great job behind the camera, but unfortunately, I struggle to say anything that's overly great. There are elements where I'm like, that is a good idea, and I'd like to see it go further and be effective, but unfortunately, the payoff just isn't, and fuck's sake. In the end, I really didn't like The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. I really hope you guys enjoy it more than I did. But with all that said, I'm going to give The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It a D+. So guys, what did you think of The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It? I want to see what you guys have to say down in the comment section below. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Or are you somewhere right in the middle? Comment down below. Let me know. Do be sure also follow the social medias at Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, and Twitch to watch my live streams and keep updated with your content coming to the channel. Do be sure to click the subscribe button and the bell to get notified when new videos are up every single week. Do be sure to give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take care.